Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Startup Grind Bloemfontein. It's an absolute honor to be hosting these two gentlemen today. So we're going to jump right into the interview. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us today. I would like to start with a bit of background. Can you guys share with us where you're from and who Stevo and James are?
Cool. So James gave me the mic. um, yeah, I'm Stevo. I've formerly, previously, before I started working in coffee, I used to be a teacher at a primary school. So studied education, worked as a teacher for almost 4 years. Nearly died, literally. And on my way, my wife had my wife sitting there, what a legend. So she had a conference in Joburg. So I was driving with her. And I told her, because at the time I was doing music as well, and that's how I know Leslie. I was just going to drop that. so I told my wife, listen, I'd love to like play more, like as a musician, as an income, and then one day when I'm like 40, I would like to have this really small but really cool space that serves amazing coffee. And she just looked at me and she's like, yeah, just get better. And little did I know, I spent like that whole weekend in Braamfontein, like visiting like the coolest coffee shops around, and the guys were so open to share. So from there, I came back. Things just escalated. Knew nothing about business. Escalated into coffee, something that I loved as a teacher. Irritated my wife a lot at home with like coffee grounds everywhere. And yeah, little did I know that, like 3-4 years later, I'll be sitting like training people and like loving coffee and people. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yourself, James?
Right. So my journey started pretty much the same way as a lot of the coffee professionals I've spoken to. None of us stepped into coffee necessarily. We all kind of came from somewhere else, and through some life-changing events, we found ourselves falling in love with coffee and starting coffee shops, or starting coffee roasteries and whatever. We entered into the coffee industry through something else. I started off my career thinking I was going to be a radio DJ for the rest of my life. The reality is that a radio DJ has a very short shelf life. I found that out very quickly. 15 years, and then it all changed. So I was retrenched from permanent employee, not to badmouth my former employer, but that's a decision that they made at the time, which I'm now very grateful for. So I actually now have to say thank you to them for pushing me in the deep end, and I happened to fall into the coffee industry. I went through a variety of different changes in how I went into the coffee industry. I started off just by having someone else roast the coffee for me. All I wanted was, I realized Bloemfontein didn't have very good coffee, in my opinion. I was drinking better coffee in other places, so I think a lot of people would have agreed that you'd have to go to Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg to enjoy a really good cup of coffee. Bloemfontein was just not hitting the mark. So I decided, Bloem needed good coffee, and I started a company called Connoisseur Coffee. I had the website address concoffee.co.za, which I realized is probably not a good thing to call your company Con anything. So just realized the reason why I called it Con Coffee as a website, or as as an email address, is because people couldn't spell connoisseur. It's like people can't spell cappuccino, so it's the same kind of thing. So that's where I started. I was pushed into the deep end. I started off just selling coffee at the Boeremark, selling filter coffee and bags of coffee that I didn't roast, but they graciously allowed me to stick my label on their bags, and it allowed me to test the market and learn to deal with clients and to sell a product, something which I'd never had to do before. I was stuck behind a microphone in a studio, talking to people, but I had to sell them something, but it was all scripted, so I could sell someone else's product as long as I knew what to say, so give me the script, I'd be fine. So what that allowed me to do was actually to test the market and see how things worked. And then I realized that I needed to start my own my own brand. I realized I wasn't satisfied with just having somebody else roast coffee. I wanted to have more of an identity, make it more my own. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to do that by having somebody else's coffee with my labels stuck on it. It just felt like I was lying to people. It's like saying, well, this is my coffee. Well, no, it's not my coffee. It's my label on a bag. That's all it is. Which is fine. There's a lot of people that start their companies that way, and it's the way I started my companies. So, but it's not something I feel comfortable with. So I took ownership of it, invested in some coffee roasting, learned to become a coffee roaster, bought a coffee roaster in early 2013, and this journey started in 2011. So by 2013, I was roasting my own coffee. Opened Stereo Cafe in 2014, just around the corner here, where New York Pizza Slice is now. I had 3 tables and 12 chairs, as Tony will know. Tony came in and drank coffee quite often in our small little coffee shop, with other clients that have also started businesses subsequently. Stevo was one of them. I worked for another coffee company at the time. Jill from Jack and Jill, who's also done a startup grind, was also there. And so we kind of all started our businesses. But and today we find ourselves at this premises, which is bigger. It's got a wonderful garden. We've got a great landlord, got more space, and three times more headaches. But here we are, 5 years later, and since opening the cafe, at least 5 years later, 6 years since I started roasting coffee, and we look forward to forging relationships with new people who are interested in entering the coffee industry in various ways. So, yeah, that's me.
So coffee blew up, I think, around the world. There was a bit of a coffee craze, and Stevo, you mentioned, you went to all of these amazing coffee spots in Braam, which is quite a hip spot. So let's start with why Bloemfontein, and then why coffee? I like to ask people this question because it's, easier to fall into the trend of something when it's already happening. But you guys formed part of the early adopters of the coffee movement in Bloemfontein.
So, I'm just thinking of a name now. You guys probably know the brand Love Warrior. They sadly closed down recently, but the owner, Nico Fourie, he was literally one of the guys that I felt like he's like a guy that I love. I like what he's pushing out, and guys like us always move to greater city or bigger cities, go to Joburg or go to Cape Town or wherever. I was like, but why? Why do we have to move to Cape Town to get something that's cool there? So I try to connect with like-minded people to, if you're traveling to Joburg or Maboneng, and if you're traveling for that and you like that, why can't we have that here? Not have a mini Joburg here, but how can we find that niche which you are interested in as whether you're an entrepreneur or whatever you are, whatever you like, how can you find that where you are? And for me that was tough, honestly. I can say now that I love Bloem, but for most of my time, even as a musician, I just wanted to move. I wanted to move, and I again irritated my wife by just wanting to move to cooler things, where things are happening, and the market is not as tough, if you know what I'm saying. Well, I'm learning now that it's actually tougher, for various reasons. But I think I took a massive detour, and then getting opportunities in the last 2 years, and then saying no because I don't want to move. I don't want to move Bloem. I think we still have things to do here, in the coffee community and in the industry, and what I'm pushing out. I definitely don't want to move now. So I'm in a space where I'm collaborating with like-minded companies. So I'll work with you, but I won't work for you. So I'm not saying this indefinitely, but that's where I am at the moment. And again, not arrogant. It's just I'm super happy to say this, and I'm super happy to stay in Bloem and to connect with the people and to uplift. I'm not that I know everything, but to uplift people. Yeah, I think we have lots of potential. Just coming back from competition now. And people are so excited about Bloem, and I'm like, but why, And I come back with a really a massive sense of, grateful. I've got a grateful heart for the people here. So people here are super friendly and super warm, And in coffee, I'm glad to have that, like warm customer service, which I'm pushing so hard at the moment, because I think we don't see it every day. So yeah, that's why Bloom and that's why coffee.
Same question for me. Okay. So it's interesting. Stevo said he always wanted to move out of Bloom, and I felt the same way. I'm not from Bloemfontein. I had no roots here. I have no history here. I had friends of my family, Leonard Lemmer, that used to live in town. He worked at the university at the music department. That was my only link to this, and our intervarsity, of course, between Korfsies and Pukke. So I'm an enemy of the people. I come from Potch. I grew up there. I spent a lot of my time in Johannesburg and always felt that is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the great metropolis of Johannesburg. And for the first few years of living in Bloemfontein, all I wanted to do was leave. I found it very difficult. In the industry that you're in, when I was in radio, for instance, it's quite interesting just to sketch some background for you. The totally two different worlds that I've been in while I'm here. Radio, as a radio presenter, you speak to thousands of people at one time, but you don't know them. It's a very, very isolated. You sit in a radio studio, as I said before, with a script, and you have no idea, absolutely none, of who you're really talking to. I mean, I'm saying this now from my experience. It might be different for some of the other guys in the industry, but overall, you're pretty isolated. You think you like to know through research and statistics that are handed to you and said, well, this is who we're talking to. This is your audience. And then you realize that when you've moved into the coffee industry, which is a very sociable industry, and I've met more people in the 5 years that I've had a cafe, I've met the people of Bloemfontein. I really have got to know that there are a wealth of very interesting people here. So anybody, and it was my own impression of Bloemfontein, of being, a little conservative. And granted, Bloem has also changed in the last 15, 16, 17 years that I've lived here. Bloem has become a little bit more cosmopolitan, and people have become a little bit more open to new things, which helps us in coffee. And people have started to travel. People have started to explore the world and realize that Bloemfontein, we live here because we want to live here. We live here because we see the potential that Bloemfontein offers. And that's why, eventually I got married. So that my wife is from Bloemfontein, so there was one reason not to move. So I decided to settle. Once I got the ring on the finger, I was like, okay, well, that's it. You're a Bloemfonteiner now. But I think I came to terms with the fact that I now live here, and I think I've grown to love it more since I've opened the cafe. Because I've got to know the people. I've got to meet more people and have more conversations than any radio DJ. I wish they'd work in a cafe. Guys in the media industry should work and serve clients and have discussions with people. I think it would open their eyes as to who they're really talking to. Because there's I'm just looking at the audience that is here today. There's such a wealth and diverse community. And if this is representative of the people in Bloemfontein, it is. This is who we are. We're a wealth of cultures and diverse backgrounds and people that are not from South Africa originally, but you also have decided to make Bloemfontein your home. The other people that are here have also moved from other cities to live here, or have grown up here all their lives. This is a fascinating thing. You think that Bloemfontein's not cosmopolitan, and I look at the audience in front of me, I'm going, I beg to differ. This is amazing. Of the diversity in Bloemfontein. So why Bloemfontein? Well, because I grew to fall in love with the place, and every time I go away, if I go to Joburg now, yes, it's nice. Go to Cape Town, yeah, it's nice. But I hate to be in that traffic every day. Joburg was fine 15, 20 years ago. It didn't have traffic, not like we're seeing today. So why would you want to live there where you have absolutely no lifestyle? It's a different lifestyle. It's nice to visit and stay a few days, and then you want to just leave. You come back and you get frustrated by spending 5 minutes in traffic in Bloemfontein. We still get frustrated with traffic. If it takes us longer than 10 minutes to get anywhere, we get very frustrated in Bloem. So what was the other? So I digress a lot. It was why Bloemfontein, was that right? And
Why Bloemfontein?
Why coffee?
Why not?
Why not? I mean, it's interesting. Why coffee? I mean, for that reason, I think through having to make a decision of going, okay, you've been retrenched, you've been put on a 2-year contract, but that's after 2 years, then what? And, and looking at going, okay, well, having a cup of coffee at Beaver Creek Coffee Estate down in on our honeymoon. I mean, I was retrenched just before I got married. So sitting on my honeymoon going, I'm now married. And Bloemfontein's my home. Now what? I've got 2 years to sort myself out. And I don't know. So my journey to start a cafe, actually, I don't want to digress too much because I can talk all night. But to sketch a background as to, and it also why I called this Stereo Cafe. As a radio presenter, as a guy that felt he was in the music industry, I worked at a place in the Randburg waterfront when I was a student called Megavox. Was a privately owned music shop at the Randburg waterfront before they closed up the water, and now it's called Brightwater Commons. Still using water there, it just doesn't make sense. But I used to work there and I loved the vibe. And I don't know if everyone's seen High Fidelity. It's a movie starring John Cusack, his sister Joan Cusack, and another actress whose name I can't remember. But John Cusack played in a movie called High Fidelity. He was the owner of a record shop in, it was originally written in London, but they set the movie in some city in America, Chicago or something like that. But I loved the idea. If you've watched Empire Records or any of those sort of indie movies about young, grungy teenagers, early adulthood people, I still have a kind of grungy look. I just don't wear boots anymore. But I wanted to open a music shop. That was my original plan. I wanted to open a CD store. And then Napster came along in 1999 and destroyed the music industry as we know it. And now we've got, yes, I'm being chowed by a mozzie, I think. That's kind of where I started. I wanted to open a CD shop, music shops, LPs, whatever. I wanted to. That was my original plan. And then, as I said, the music industry, how retail happened, changed the face of music. We can see it by Virgin Music megastores in London closing. HMV was a huge store. They've all closed. Musica is no longer Musica. It's Gamica, or whatever you want to call it. But it sells VHSs and stuff. It doesn't sell music anymore. We stream on Spotify and Apple Music and all the rest of it. So that whole industry changed, but I still had this desire to open a music store. There's something I still wanted. When I fell into coffee, and I did say falling into coffee because it was exactly that. It was one of those decisions going, okay, coffee. But when I was looking through names, I was like, I can call it Jimmy's Cafe or James's Place, or I don't know, something, been there, done that, or and not to knock Urban Brew, but I wanted to not call it something coffee related, except the cafe part, of course. And I thought, well, the one thing I can do is start a coffee shop with a music theme, and that's where Stereo Cafe got its name. Because I loved music and I wanted to open a music store, decided, well, that's something that I'd never heard before. There was a Stereo Cafe radio station in Brazil. There was a Stereo Cafe bar in Glasgow in Scotland. Now, if you Google Stereo Cafe, you'll find there's a Stereo Cafe in Munich, Stereo Cafe brand through other things as well. So now I'm no longer the only one of 3 Stereo Cafes. I'm now one of many that you can Google, but I'm the only Stereo Cafe that roasts coffee, and people are just about that. The people incorrectly locate me, so they tag me in Munich having coffee, and I look at the photo. I'm going, that's not me. It's too clinical. So that's why I think why coffee. It just happened to cross my path. It wasn't like this thing that I wanted to do. I wanted a music store, opened a coffee shop, and fused the two in a name and decor. So, yeah. Anyway.
Well, that's actually very interesting because a lot of conversations around entrepreneurship today are, follow your passion. And neither of you sounded particularly passionate about coffee when you started. So, but I'm assuming you became passionate about it. So getting into the business, running your businesses, tell us a bit about that transition into entrepreneurship and becoming entrepreneurs and how you've gotten, or perhaps the journey of how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, so for me, I was actually quite passionate about coffee. I was not passionate about business. I knew nothing about business. I was super stupid. And I think today still stupid, with regards to business. So I had this trip to Joburg, came back, and literally someone gave me a third of a coffee shop. So I was like, I've never heard this. I don't know what this means, but I suppose it's good. Cool, thank you. So signed contracts. Ridiculous. If I think back, I'm like, flip. Anyway, so then I knew very little about business and about coffee, but I was super passionate about it and super passionate about people, and today even more so. So I had the opportunity to learn about coffee from 8 to 5. Every day, that's what I did, and I did that for 9 months until I gave back the shares. I was like, thank you, this is great, but it's not for me. I think it's meant for someone else. But again, I'm so happy that I had this opportunity because I learned a lot about business. I obviously learned a lot about coffee, but I also learned a lot about the customers and what they want and how to interact. And I'm just thinking now again, the two baristas there that I trained were just alongside, because that's just who I am. I want to work alongside people, and I want to make the coffee myself, whether I'm shareholder or not. I want to be able to step behind the bar and make the coffee and engage with the employer, but as well as the client. So I learned a lot about that, made a lot of, from there, moved to my own thing, wanting to open a specific space. I wanted to bring Cape Town to Bloemfontein. So I had this really fixed idea of how I wanted to serve coffee in a specific market, and I will refuse to serve sugar. So very arrogant. I remember going to the first coffee expo, Shippy's, yeah. So going to the first coffee expo, launched my brand. I launched Urban Brew with this hipster logo, and I was like, this is my market, and I'm going to serve Truth Coffee from Cape Town, and I'm kind of partnering with them. So I'm like, I will refuse to serve sugar because it's not the best way. And I was very black and white with regards to this. I remember people coming to me, and they're hearing the rumors that I don't serve sugar. So they'll stand in line with sugar that they got from the guy next door. Oh, man. So I'm thinking back now, the way that I thought about coffee and people back then, and now it's totally different, 180. And I'm super happy about it. So from there, I basically rodeoed, cameo, my own thing, whatever you call that. And my things didn't come through. So 4 months I was driving around the city, trying to find events to make coffee for. Borrowing machines or renting machines. I hustled like a madman. So I remember starting to do specific corporate events with Tony and Envy, and my things didn't come through, and that was great, but it wasn't sustainable for me. So I was like, how am I going to make money? I've got time, so how can I put time into rands? So I remember walking into, this was, I think, one of the lowest moments in my life, but I'm so thankful. I walked into Woolworths Cafe. So I was like, listen guys, you've got great equipment, you've got decent beans, I can make coffee, I think I can help you. Not in that tone of voice, but I was like, I think this might be a match. And I remember the guy was like, okay, I think you're overqualified, because I actually had training. And I was like, okay, I don't care, I just want a job, man. Just give me money. So my wife and I, Zoe was born at that time. So James was saying I had a wife. I'm like, I had a child, man. And stuff got real, So I was really forced to learn about business. So passionate about people, passionate about coffee, and like going into that, and arrogant at the time as well. So like trying to find a balance between, actually selling something, you know. So I was like starting like a music business and like organizing gigs for people and like playing sessions and theater gigs and stuff, which is great, but again, not sustainable. So I worked in Woolworths for 3 weeks, and then I got offered like other opportunities that paid more. So I worked for like 17 rand an hour, and again, like I'm so thankful that I had that. When I train people, I know exactly where you are. I know if you're getting paid minimum wage, I understand where you are. I don't agree with it, but I understand where you are and what's expected of you. But I know this is not the end of the road. Like definitely, there's more to it. So, long story. After that, I started working for another local roastery. Worked there for like literally a year, until I relaunched Urban Brew again. It was a very, very hectic time for me. I don't know if this is maybe part of the future questions. I'm just going into it, but a very hectic time. Like like thinking, what do I want to do? Like I remember going like on holiday with my parents-in-law, and I was so like freaking depressed about like what I'm doing. I'm working in coffee and I love coffee and I love people and I'm doing what I want to do. My wife has just asked me this question, like, what do you want to do? Like, what is it that you want to do? And I was like, flip, I don't really know. Like, I'm working in coffee, but even coffee, although it's a niche, coffee in a bean form is a niche market, but like, what do you want to do in that niche? So I had to kind of first identify what it is that I want to do and then work towards it. So it took me a long time, but I think only now that I feel like I found the space that I want to be in, and I want to double click that. I want to even find a niche within the niche, but still make it sustainable. And without having a shop, without having a roastery, nothing against that, but I feel like it's quite a saturated market. So how can I find myself in there, but not be the classic stereotype of that? So I had to learn very fast, because for me it's not like I'm building this business and it's a side hustle. It's like it's my only hustle. I have to make money. I have to go back and put food on the table, pay my rent, or pay my house. I had a bond. Stuff got real. So yeah, I had to find ways, and then I had to connect with people, not only like-minded, people that liked what I feel I like, but people that I feel I can learn from, and also learn from people's mistakes. So I think one thing that I can definitely say, and not being ashamed, like I was never scared. Like I'll do something and fail miserably, fall on my face flat, and just stand up and go. Like, because what's gonna happen? Like I always have the saying of, like the answer's already no, so it can't be worse than that. So just ask. If someone says no, it's like cool, thank you, move on. If you did something and failed, cool, now you know, don't do it again. Stand up and find out what was wrong, fix it, or find the correct method or strategy. So just trying to link that to entrepreneurship and finding your space. If James does something, it's great, and I think he's doing an amazing job. That's why I work with him. But I can't see myself doing that because I'm not James. I'm Stevo. Like I've got a different skill set. So find what you have to do. Like if it works for your competitor, it's not going to work for you necessarily, depending on the market. I'm assuming, but find what you need to do and what you want to do. Not just because it works, but is it what you want to do, and is it authentic to who you are? So that's stuff that helped me just to learn about business, but also find my niche. Yeah.
And did you ever have anybody to lean on in terms of developing business skills?
Flip, I was quite alone, I must be honest. Like I think that's one thing of Bloom, like yeah, you have to really dig deep. And for me, I think basically the support that I had was church. Like sorry. So I didn't have like a lot of businessmen that I could lean on, and up until recently also like coffee comrades, that I could go to. So I literally I just like went to church So and those were the guys that helped us a lot, like still sharing and imparting wisdom in various ways. So for me, that's my main support structure. Like besides my wife and my family, obviously helping a lot. My mom's here and my in-laws also like super helpful. They're both in Bloem, and it's a massive support structure for us. But besides that, definitely church. Like I can't see even Urban Brew as a company like standing alone without church. I definitely see that as part of it, like the community. And James has been speaking about community and growing community and getting to know people. And for me, that was church, and today still is. But I'm definitely moving outside of that as well, and like growing the network even beyond the boundaries of Bloemfontein or the Free State. But yeah, for me, support structure, church, emotionally, wisdom, all of that. That was the story for me. Yeah.
And for you, James, building your business, everybody Googles how to open a coffee shop in 24 hours.
Don't believe everything you read. It's there's no. I don't think there's a cookie cutter kind of thing. It's not a difficult industry, I think, necessarily to enter. What do you need? You need a coffee grinder, coffee machine, a good location. I wouldn't say we have probably the best location here, not when one thinks coffee shops require good footfall. South Africans, even Bloemfonteинers, are lazy, I'm going to say that. If the parking's not in the shade, I'll drive on. If it's not within 50 meters, I'll drive on. If I can't get parking close as possible to the door, I'll turn around and go home. No, sorry. It's a different kind of culture because I lived in London for 2 years. I travel a lot to Europe. I love traveling. It's one of my passions. It's where I kind of fell in love with the cafe idea. So in Starbucks, but I won't say that too loudly. I lived in London, went to Starbucks. It was my favorite place to go, not because the coffee was so great, but it's because it gave me some form of. It was my refuge in a city that I knew no one in. I was alone for 80% of my time there. I didn't know anyone. I liked the solitude, I must say. I learned a lot about myself in those 2 years, but I loved sitting there with my cappuccino in a mug and my lemon poppy seed muffin. So I tried to relive that experience when Starbucks opened in Rosebank. Lemon poppy seed muffins aren't the same, and the coffee's definitely not what I remembered. Anyway, some things should just be kept in your memories. It's like watching a movie again. Don't do it again. I tried doing that with Good Morning Vietnam. I bought the DVD. I said, I remember this movie. And I regretted buying that again. It's like, just remember the movie as being great when you watched it the first time. Don't try and relive your youth. Anyway, so I've digressed again. I like doing that. What was the question?
This is James just like allowing us into the world of James.
Yes, welcome to my mind.
Well, basically building
a business.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Building the business. I don't know. It's starting a business. I think that was your question about starting a coffee shop. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's a very easy and simple concept. As an idea, but it's understanding what your market wants. I think is firstly a very important thing. Is like, okay, well, Stevo is saying bringing Cape Town to Bloemfontein. Yes, but Bloemfontein is still not Cape Town. The people are different. The tastes are different. We like what we like. Sometimes when we go down to Cape Town, it's nice. It's a very big foodie culture there. There's an enormous amount of coffee. The approach to coffee is very different in Cape Town. So there's a lot of this thing, and I've seen it through a few businesses trying to emulate what's happening in Cape Town and trying to do that in Bloemfontein. The fact that it's successful in Cape Town doesn't mean it's going to be a success in Bloemfontein. You can't use the same pricing structures because the market is different. The disposable income is different. If you're trying to emulate or trying to duplicate something that's coming out of a different city and trying to plonk it down here, you can, but you've got to change the business model a little bit. You've got to understand that the people are different. You've got an audience that likes that, but you've got to kind of tweak it towards the Bloemfontein. I mean, even though the guys like traveling down to Cape Town, you still got to, you're dropping your things.
That's why it's plastic.
So I think it's if you're going to open a coffee shop, if that's something that you really want to do, it's a great place to open. It's a wonderful thing, but you've got to be very focused on what it is that you want to achieve. And Stevo is talking about finding his niche in the market. It's like, okay, so there are lots of coffee shops in town. What distinguishes you from everyone else? So it's the same in any business. What is your buzzword USP? What is your unique selling point? And it doesn't matter whether you're in the coffee industry. So Stevo's unique selling point is that he is a barista trainer. He's not a coffee roaster, as he said. That's not what he aspires towards. He has his own coffee brand, which is great. He has he's living some of his dream by running coffee stalls across town, which is a different approach to running a coffee. He doesn't have a brick and mortar coffee shop. He has the facilities at Doxadeo Church, and he has his coffee stall at Kühn, formerly known as Quintiles, which is great, and then all the other events that he does. And that's allowed him to niche himself into a certain part of the market. When I opened, I think my unique selling point was I'm a coffee roaster and I'm the only one in Bloemfontein. Oh boy, did that change quickly. And that makes it very difficult and challenging, because at the first I became very complacent. I think that's my downfall, is complacency is the downfall of every business, of every career. Even if you work for somebody, if you become complacent, you believe that you're the best at what you do, you'll be out of a job soon enough, because there's somebody else with more drive right behind you. And they'll upset the apple cart, and you'll find yourself either without a job, or you'll find yourself in a place where you're no longer the market leader. In all honesty, I think I find myself in that position at the moment. It's allowed me to do a lot of retrospective and a lot of internalizing of ideas, and realizing that in order to stay ahead in the market, I have got a lot of work to do, because I'm no longer the only roaster in town. That was my unique selling point, and guys came along with a lot more energy than I did, younger than I am, more capital than I have, access to funds that I don't have access to, and I think that's the challenge of staying ahead in business. But it's sticking to your guns. So if your competitor is doing something, don't go and chase after them, because then you're no longer leading. You're now following. So find what you want to do and stay true to your original idea. I'll use an example at the cafe, because people think that you come to a coffee shop. And a coffee shop's a very broad term. That's another thing that you've got to realize if you're going to come into this industry. So what is your passion? If your passion is food, then you're opening a restaurant. All right. If you're going to be doing plates of food and coffee is secondary, then you're not a coffee shop. You're a restaurant, but you also sell coffee. So I distinguish between the two. Coffee shop is a very broad term, and it's people win best coffee shop, but actually a restaurant, they're not really a cafe. So a cafe for me is even more niched. You serve pastries and muffins and brownies and cookies and things that go with coffee. That to me is a cafe. So I think you've got to decide exactly where you fall within that. And I'm saying you can serve good coffee and good food. There's nothing wrong with that. But you've got to decide where your strengths lie. And if your strengths lie in serving great food, and you really want good coffee, because I mean that's the two things. You can have great food and mediocre coffee, or you can have great food and great coffee. So people are going to come for you for good food and good coffee, or good coffee. So you're drawing a broader audience to your establishment. I've decided to go the other route. I serve good coffee. I've brought elements of food into my cafe through the years. I can tell you now that between my roasted coffee beans and my cups of coffee, that 80% of my business is made up by that, and less than 10% is made up by food. So, and I don't have to worry about capital investment in establishing a kitchen, because that's a vast capital layout if you want to put in a kitchen, and then you need the staff for that as well. So, and the stress and the stock, and if it's on your menu, you've got to keep the stock and the stuff in. So yes, it's an easy industry to enter, but enter it with caution and know exactly what it is that you want to achieve. So for me, it's about serving a great coffee experience. I want you to be able to taste a good cup of coffee, maybe something you've never tasted before. You enjoy the ambience, you enjoy the vibe. I am not a restaurant, so what I want to caution against is falling into the trap of saying, what you should do with your business. You know what you should do? You should serve breakfast. So you start serving breakfast, and you sell 2 a day. But you've spent 100,000 rand putting in a kitchen. Right? You realize, well, maybe that's not really what most of my guys wanted. Was they didn't want breakfast, because that's not what they want here. They don't want a breakfast. So anyway, so it's just an example. I haven't spent 100,000 rand in a kitchen. I still don't serve breakfast. It's because it's a decision that I've made and saying, well, that's not the kind of place I am. I'm not a bacon and eggs joint. If you want that, there are a number of other places to go and enjoy. And this is where I try and segment myself just a little bit. I'm the kind of place that you pop in, have a cup of coffee and leave. Because that's the way it is overseas. You come in, you sit down, you have a cup of coffee, 20 minutes, you're out the door. Or you come in, grab a cup of coffee and go back to your office. That's also a big part of my business. But it's allowed me to at least niche myself in a way. I have I've realized two businesses in one. I'm a coffee roaster and I've got the cafe. The success of my coffee roastery wouldn't have been a success without the cafe. And the cafe wouldn't have been a success without the coffee roastery. They're symbiotic. So it's not complicated, but it's very complicated as well. The concept is simple, but you don't have to be a cookie cutter. Don't try and be another Starbucks, or don't try and be somebody else. Be yourself, but decide on what it is that you're going to focus on. Just quickly, just to touch also on the support base, I was very fortunate that my dad had a printing business in Potchefstroom for 35 years. He was very successful. He was a visionary, if I may say so. When he worked for a local printing works, Potch Herald, which is a local newspaper like Bloemnieuws is here in town, or probably more equivalent to something like Bloemfontein Courant. They still did lead typesetting, so you'd work backwards, and they set everything by hand. So every page was laid out by hand. Everything was put in place. But then the computers came around, and my dad said, well, he opened his business just before computers started. And the first computer came out, and I remember it was still a full desk. You had this computer, took up a whole desk. I mean, the PC boards were, huge things. Anyway, it's quite fascinating to see them now, they're like trays. You could serve coffee on them. And the guys at the printing works that he used to work for at Potch Herald, they laughed at him. They said, this is just a fad. It's not going to catch on. Look where we are now. You've got your cell phones that you can social media and do simple designs on, So they're more powerful than that very first computer that my dad had. But through that I learnt a lot. Through watching him in business, he was a very sociable person. He loved talking to people. He would strike up a conversation in a lift. And if you climb into a lift, no one talks to each other or looks at each other. Everyone just stares at the floor. But my dad would be the guy that struck up a conversation. He was well respected by people in town, other businessmen come and speak to him just to have a discussion, just to talk. And I learned there that business is not about the transaction. Right? So business to me is something that I realized only in hindsight after, analyzing the way I did business and looking at my dad, who passed away a year after I opened my business. So, but looking at the way he did business and hearing the stories and at his funeral, you're listening to the way people were talking about him, I realized that that business is, the transaction is always going to happen. People have come to you to do business with you. They haven't come to you to, it's not just an impersonal thing. It's not just, I want a cup of coffee, here's a cup of coffee, okay, go away. It's not that. People in business, especially in Bloemfontein, I think, strike up relationships. It's about having a relationship with your service provider, with your coffee shop owner, with your with your local supplier of X, Y, and Z. I mean, I think all businessmen here, Tony has relationships. I can see it with people that he has forged relationships with. He's worked, hand in hand with people like Jill, who I know very well as well. So, and a number of other people that I don't know, but I can see it through his social media. He's a guy at Networks, but it's about relationship, because the business is going to happen, right? People have come to you and said, "I want to come and do business with you." So the transaction is inevitable, but it's what you do between the meeting and the end of the transaction that forges the next transaction. So next time he comes to you, it's not... So first he came, so let's say Stevo as an example. Yes, please take that, thank you. Actually, you can just put it down somewhere. Come to you for a reason. So the first time you walk into the cafe, you've just come in for a great cup of coffee. You don't know me, you don't know my barista Joseph, you don't know Ntabi Singh or Nkosi or anybody that works for me. So the first time you just come in, it's a transaction, but we strike up a conversation and we find out more about you. That's 5 minutes, you're out the door. The next time you come in, I know who you are. I know you work for a certain company, and we have a more of a conversation. And so through time, we've developed this relationship. You come to me for coffee, but we now have a connection. And it's more than just coffee. Coffee was the foundation. It was the glue of why we started this thing. And whatever your business is, that is the foundation that you've laid. So people keep coming back to you for your business, not because you're the cheapest, not because you're necessarily, hopefully you're the best at what you do, but people build up that relationship, and with the relationship comes trust. And that's what I saw with my dad, and that's where I like to see my business as well. As you can see, I have trouble shutting up, so coming in with a conversation for me can be never-ending. So I apologize. But it is about discussions and relationships and building that, because the transaction is inevitable. It's going to happen. So people have come to do business with you over and over and over again, but later on it's not so much about the transaction, it's about the relationship that you're forging. And that's important to remember that, and it's not necessarily that way with all of your clients. I mean, I know some clients just don't, they come in, they only here to buy a cup of coffee, don't talk to me, put the money down, there we go, out the door, and you learn to deal with different clients in different ways. So some clients don't want the conversation and others do, and it's learning to know where, because you can supply too much information to people and you just drown them with that, and they're so... They walk out, you're not knowing half of what you said, and hopefully you'll see them again, but chances are you just scare them off. That thing of what I learned from my dad, so that background is very much that business is a relationship, it's not a transaction.
Well, I'd like to ask both of you, what is, with having spoken about how technology killed the music industry and having spoken about staying ahead of developments, within the industry, what is the future of coffee in terms of technology? Is there anything we see coming, or that you've employed to stay ahead of the industry, or is coffee just coffee?
So the industry is like, I think with social media, everything is moving so fast. So, and I think James has been like sharing a lot of, just reinventing yourself continuously, because things won't be the same. For example, now, well, in 2 years' time, things won't be the same as now, because I can't serve coffee the same way. I can't engage with people the same way. So what I'm seeing as, I suppose, still very young in the industry, like I think, for me, it's all about, again, like customer relationship, like knowing people. Because I mean, now you have people literally like a machine, not even people, a machine, a robot making your coffee in Asia, making coffee for you. So you don't have to speak to anyone. You can like punch a few buttons, and this machine will make number probably with your face on it. Like, I'm not lying. Like latte art with your face, honestly, like a photo of you on the coffee. People pay for this. So seeing this and then asking myself, okay, well, if it's not like one day like 2020, or not even 2020, like 3020. It's not so far off. It's happening now. So what am I going to do now, 2019 in Bloemfontein, because that's where I am. So what am I going to do to not stay ahead, but like to differentiate? So for me, that differentiating factor for me is literally not only, and it's a number of things. So maybe to touch up on a few, is like for me, it's obviously making great coffee, really believing in it. And I think that's a story, like my story in entrepreneurship has always been passion. So if I'm super passionate about something, people can see. And I was fortunate enough that when I'm passionate, people see that and they're like drawn to what I do. So I would make coffee at an event and people would stand queues, super busy, and they're going to wait. So I'm thinking they're going to get to me probably irritated because they're waiting a long time and we're trying to do our best and all of that. But I'm just enjoying it in the moment, like now. And then people will get to the front and they're so excited to see what I do because they see me from afar and how passionate I am about it. And it's not why I do it, it's just I love what I do. So if you get to watch me love what I do, that's awesome. I'm glad to share that, right? Even if it's not a conversation, but it's something that I get to like, exude. So for me, it's passion. It's about customer relationship. So not only, I got to know James as a consumer, as someone who drinks coffee and who likes coffee, who knows nothing about it, has lots of opinions about it, and yeah. So for me, it's all about that engagement, not only from behind the machine and making great coffee, but like being able to connect with the people, with the person on the other side, and not just being interested in their money or the sale. I'm interested in who you are. I'm catching up on conversation and chipping in if you're open to it, And for example, where I serve coffee at IQVIA, that's what I'm building. Like I have a community there that I serve coffee to on a weekly basis, and I love it. Like coming back from competition and serving coffee there on Monday morning was a highlight. I'm just going to enjoy it with my people, And for me, that's amazing. I really love that. And the differentiating factor for me is literally customer service. For me, it's customer service. Like a robot can make the greatest coffee in the world. For me, a conversation with a human being, maybe it's just because I'm extroverted and I love people, but for me, a conversation with a human being is still better. I'd still rather have hopefully you don't serve average coffee, but I'd rather settle for something that's maybe a bit more inconsistent because we're human. I'd still settle for that, but a great conversation and a relationship, and that's what James has been saying. I'll still settle for that than the perfect cup, whatever that is, with my face on it. So for I don't want to see my face on the coffee.
Your face on it is a perfect cup of coffee.
Oh, dude. Anyway. So for me, that's basically what I'm building, and also like through training, getting to work with baristas that start out in coffee. I often train people and I start out at the beginning of training asking like, who of you drink coffee? Like last year, August, I had a group of 20 people, and I asked them at the beginning of the session, so be honest, who of you you're working in coffee, so you're a barista, right? You don't do anything else, you're making coffee. So who of you work in coffee and you actually drink coffee and enjoy it? And who of you do this because it's a job? And 2 people raised their hands saying that they actually drink coffee. And they actually like coffee. Like 18 out of 20 people said, this gives me a salary and this is why I do it. And I don't drink coffee, I don't enjoy it. And that's the reality, that's the fact. So coming from a space like being super arrogant, as you've heard, I can now say that I'm not there anymore. So for me, it's become not only about the consumer and people there, but also people behind the bar and like seeing opportunity for people to get a job in coffee. Like I've always been saying, coffee is about people. So if coffee is about people, I don't have have the resources to travel to Kenya and Ethiopia and visit the farms, I'd love to. Like, that's life goals, hashtag. So I don't have that yet. But what can I do now? Again, what can I do now to actually make an impact in that? So if coffee is about people, where can I start? I'm living in Bloemfontein. What can I do? I can train people up now, get them into this industry, and coffee can create a job for them. Like in your industry, you can create space for people to work. Like even if it's ground level, get them in. People that are unemployed, get them in. So that's something that I think, because I struggled with like a lot of things, and one of them definitely being, I almost felt unemployed, but I just had like a lot of drive. So I had this company, but didn't mean anything. So I still had zero money in my bank. So I just had drive. So for me, I think something in my heart broke for unemployment. And because for me, coffee is about people, not only the customer, but also baristas. So being able to work with people and helping them find employment through coffee, giving them a skill that actually means something. And coffee now, I think last year, they registered actually as a professional skill, which for me is great, because now you can no longer pay a barista minimum wage. I don't know how anyone lives on minimum wage. So that is like off the table, because this is professional skill. And secondly, it opens up space for trainers. And that's kind of like, I was luckily early enough to get into the space of doing training, and on my way to doing accredited training through the Specialty Coffee Association of America and Europe. So hopefully finishing that this year. But like just being able to train people, and then I get to learn with them. So for me, it's not like giving you the information and now you know how to balance an espresso and acidity and bitterness and all geeky kind of stuff. But for me, it's about getting to know your story. Like, who are you as a barista? I'm training you. Okay, you're Tandiwe, where you come from? Like, you drank Frisco as a child. Okay, cool. I drank Greek coffee. So where are we now? We're all at humble beginnings. So, but this is not the end of the road. Where are you heading to? And keeping that connection, keeping the relationship also between fellow baristas, and like seeing them grow and like maybe becoming managers and starting up their own cafes. For me, that's amazing. Like, I love hearing stories of success, and sharing that, because it inspires me and it inspires others. So sorry, I'm bambling, but yeah.
Well, I think it'd be great if musicians could, at least get minimum wage.
But you get exposure.
I know, right? But thank you so much. It's been really insightful, and I'd like to open to our audience for any questions.
Hi guys, can I sit? Is it fine? My question, hi guys, I'm KK and I'm a caffeine addict.
Hello, KK.
Welcome.
So you guys did point out that you have both have business models that are very niche for Bloemfontein, but both very different. I just wanted to understand the difference now, because I noticed something different in the way you each explained it. In that, Stevo, your niche is a lot more based on your ideas and your feelings and your instincts. And sorry, I forget your name, James. James, you tend to. It sounds like yours involves a little bit more bending towards the will of the markets. So my question then is, what do you think is the most important consideration between those two when narrowing down your niche in terms of speciality?
Well, I mean, I think it's about how you approach the specialty market. In Bloemfontein, you've got so many different factors to consider. Firstly, disposable income in Bloemfontein is not as much. People are far more price conscious about various things that they buy. So we're looking at a niche. I was explaining it to somebody this morning. I did a function at a business breakfast on Monday, which kind of opened my eyes to a certain extent about how much of the market we are actually trying to access through, never mind specialty coffee. We're just generally beans roasted. So if I try and explain it to you this way, there were 450 guests at this business breakfast. I had my coffee stall, knowing that I wasn't going to try and serve all 450 people in half an hour, just physically impossible. But the organizers had also arranged for instant coffee, which was free of charge. I was selling coffee, they had free coffee. It was a Rick coffee or some instant coffee of sorts. I knew that some people would gravitate towards that. They don't like strong coffee. They don't want the milky espresso drinks or something like that. They perceive it as too strong. So, okay, they go for the Rick coffee. So I knew, well, okay. But then I knew that there was going to be a market that looked at the Rick coffee on the table and said, not a chance. I'm not having any of that. I'll have some of that and I'll pay for it. Okay, so just to try and differentiate the market. So the guys, a lot of people in South Africa drink coffee. A large proportion of that market. I don't have the statistics, so I'm going to say 80%, maybe even more than that, will drink instant coffee. So be it Frisco, Coffee House, Rick Coffee, Jacobs, the more expensive stuff on the market as well, Dow Egberts and the very exclusive Nescafes that you can buy as well. Those are the guys, and then you've got the guys who will go and they'll buy. They'll have a filter machine or a plunger at home. They buy pre-ground coffee. They're happy with that. And they buy it off any supermarket shelf they can find. And then you've got the guys that'll buy beans and they have their own grinder, which is a very small portion of the market. Or they've got a bean-to-cup machine push button for the convenience. Or they've got... and then you'll find guys that want freshness. They want relationship coffee. They want some form of... They want something which is a little bit higher quality, more attention to detail than what you're getting on the supermarket shelf. And if I look at the potential market that I had at the say I sold 50 cups of coffee on Monday. Could have spent my time more wisely, I suppose, on a Monday morning, close to year end. But it did prove one thing to me, and it was that just over 10% of my audience, the people available market, were willing to buy an espresso-based coffee. That's 10% of the available market, and if you think of it, let's say it's 10%. If that translates, if you could take that and blow it up as to the available coffee market in South Africa, let's say it's 10%. It's a very niche audience. But that 10% is buying from Woolworths, from Checkers Foreign Ground, from all the very well-known brands, well-established brands out there. And I am part of that little pie. So I think we're very niche. I don't know if there's a niche, but we really are focused on a very small portion of that, and it makes it very challenging for us. And then you get the specialty. Now, specialty coffee, just to sketch a little bit of a background for you as to what specialty is. Specialty coffee is something which is a higher price point coffee. It's a very traceable coffee. So it's a coffee which I can almost give you a geolocator and say coffee is from this part of the map. I can give you GPS coordinates and saying the coffee is from here. It's a high attention to detail. It's the cream of the crop, and it comes at a price. And that's where the problem lies. Because in a very price-conscious market that we are in, which is already a niche market, you're now going into specialty, which is like boutique wine. It really is. You call yourself a wine drinker, but you might find that a percentage of wine drinkers are 1% is the boutique drinker, 1% is the specialty coffee drinker. Our big challenge is to try and change the perceptions so that it isn't so much of a niche anymore, to try and break people out of that, and to try and get them drinking what is a better quality coffee, but also paying a higher premium for the better quality. So I know it probably doesn't answer your question, but it is. It's a specialty is already something very difficult to enter into a market which is more focused on price points. So from my perspective, bowing to the masses, I try not to. I try and introduce them to specialty, but I've realized that in business, if I look at how my coffee sells, I sell a variety of coffee. Specialty takes me so much longer to sell because people come in going, how much is that? 120 Rand a bag. How much is that? Well, it's 80 Rand a bag. Well, I'll have the 80 Rand a bag, thank you. Because that's kind of how people decide on stuff. But then you do have, and it's a very select audience that say 120 Rand a bag, tell them a story about the coffee, sold. So I believe that it's a growing market. It's there, but it's slower on the uptake in Bloemfontein because Bloemfontein is a little bit on the. We're more cautious here, I think, as business people as well. We allow the other cities to take the risks, and then we kind of sit back and we're going, okay, all right, 5 years later, let's do this, and we're leaders in our market. But they've been doing it in Cape Town for 10 years already. So, that's fine. It's the culture that we live in. And I think one has to be very aware of that kind of culture as well. And, we've got to make business decisions. And specialty is it's a very expensive market to enter and very difficult markets to play in. It's you're looking at sustainable business models, and unless you've got a very deep, I've seen a lot of the guys in the specialty market, even the guys at other well-known roasters, you find out, but this isn't what they do for a living. This is a passion project. This is just for fun. You're going, I wish I had deep pockets like that, Or we sit in a different market, this is our bread and butter. We don't have other industries that feed our passion projects. I don't know if that in any way answers your question, but Stevo, you can.
Yeah, so firstly, I agree. Like, it's totally different. And like I said, I was super fortunate that people just followed what I do because I want to think it's because I'm so passionate. It might be different. So yes, definitely different, but also I think I'd like to see myself as a visionary, someone who likes to see things, even if it's not here now, like try and see ahead and like try and implement that. But also, and I've had to, like everywhere in my life, I had to like try and build bridges from what I see until what's like realistic now. So it took me a long time, and I'm still growing in that. But again, like external factors like family and Zoe, our daughter, like gave me lots of perspective. So for me, I'm also fortunate that I'm not paying rent. I'm not saying I don't believe paying in rent, but I'm also fortunate that wherever I serve coffee, I don't pay rent. So my overheads are like down low. And if you speak to entrepreneurs or startup businesses, they say keep your like overheads as low as possible. And it wasn't a conscious like business mind decision that I made. It's something I just panned out. And up to this day, I'm not paying rent, and I'm super thankful for it. But it gives me a bit more leeway to do what I really want to do, to almost like find that thing that I want to do and just double click on that and make sure that it's sustainable. So yes, it is definitely different, but I think I'm in a better space, not having to pay rent, for example. Also like a very small, I think for the first, when I relaunched Urban Brew, a bit more than a year ago, I was the only employee of this company. So I sold it as a brand, and I also learned that branding is very important. So you have to have a brand, like keep it clean for me, like I like to keep it clean. And then also just be true to your brand. So I'm not going to try and do all kinds of different things because it's not what my brand does. So although I was the only employee, that's what I believed in. And up to this day, now that I have more employees, I'm still keeping it small, but getting everyone on board with this is what we do and this is what we not do. This is what we do not do. Not because we're arrogant, but we're sticking to our guns. And there are other guys out there, and just wanted to link to, it's almost like to a point of sustainability, if I may. Although I'm not a coffee roaster or a cafe, I do believe in collaboration and partnership, and that's why we're sitting here tonight. Like, I remember like leaving this roastery that I worked at and coming to see James. I literally, when I was working for this roastery, I want to say this, I came to James's cafe, like the small one. I tried to come every month, to come in and drink a coffee, not to suss out anything, not to ask any questions about his business or pricing or what he's offering or nothing like that. I came in, ordered a cortado or flat white or filter coffee, pour it over, and I was asking, like, how's business? I would sit down, Instagram, I'd drink the coffee, and I would finish it. I would stand up and I'd greet everyone and be like, I hope your business is doing well. And that's something that I had to not force myself to do, but it's something I intentionally decided to do. Because I remember at the time, like, walking in and people would be like, and still to this day, I'd walk into other coffee shops, people would be like, Stevo's here. And that's not what I want to build. I want to build like a culture even of, these guys are the opposition. I want to build a culture of, inclusivity. So for me, you have to really step out and be that. You have to do that. And that's what I had to do. So, like years later, coming to James and being like, dude, I'm not working for a roastery. This is what I want to push towards. I'm not pushing to open like a roastery or a cafe like yours, but I would like roasted coffee. And for me, I see you as a coffee roaster. That's what you're pushing into. So instead of me trying to reinvent the wheel and spend a lot of money or get sponsors or whatever to buy a roaster, let me come to the roaster and let me do what I do. I make coffee, I train people to make coffee, I take coffee to people. So I don't want to digress or want to take away effort from that. I want to stick to that and push even deeper, but collaborate with people that can help me in the process. And I think also, like, I want to encourage you, it doesn't matter like what industry you're in, to collaborate with people. Find areas to collaborate. Even in the beginning, if it's hard for you, find areas to collaborate. You have to work with people. You can't go through life alone, and we're going through like the millennials, and we're all individuals, and nothing wrong with that. But as a businessman or as an entrepreneur, you have to collaborate with people. I almost want to say, if you don't collaborate, you'll suffocate. Like, in the long term, it's going to be hard. It's going to get tough. You need people around you to definitely like help you stay true to your and what your product actually is.
If I just add to that, because it is the support that you need in an industry. So Stevo and I have very different businesses. You as you pointed out, we have different focuses and we have different goals in our business. Yet we're in the same industry. What I've found very useful since Stevo and I, it was in about almost just less than a year ago. We happened to be at training in Cape Town at the same Specialty Coffee Association training, and it's actually there where we actually forged more of a business. Before that, we had spoken with Quibus Leroux about doing something together, but it was important for me also because I'd gone through a lot of changes in my business and being exposed to. Because I was a niche business in town and I was the first roaster, and I know the other guys that come in, saw all of them come through my door and then they opened their own roasteries. So I mean, for a long time I remember seeing this one guy, you come in and sit down and almost on a daily basis. We saw him as a regular. I was like, cool, he's one of my crowd, man. And then when I opened my, had a long conversation with him on the one day, and then the next thing I knew, they'd opened their own roastery. So I was like, okay. So I've shared all my knowledge, hoping that I was going to clinch some kind of wholesale deal, and but yet I was empowering my opposition. So the reason why I tell you that story is because it made me very cautious about sharing any information about my industry. I didn't want to share information I didn't want to talk to other coffee professionals in town because you didn't want to have somebody steal your, not that the information's out there, everybody can read it. Everything I've learned about coffee is no secret. It's not like I've discovered this secret gem that that's only mine. The information's out there for everyone to read, but it did make me cautious about collaborating. And it took me a long time to realize that one can collaborate with people in the same industry as you are. And it was with Stevo encouraging me, actually. It actually pulled me into his kind of business. And I realized that, the only way I was going to grow, the only way I was going to have some kind of, because Stevo and I have had a lot of discussions about coffee, about staff, about baristas, about coffee in general. We talk non-stop about it. We've shared wonderful coffees. Stevo brings coffee from other places, always brings it and shares it with me. We make a cup of coffee, we talk about it, and we go into the geeky side of everything that we do, which is lovely because there's not a big community that does that in town. So I appreciate the collaborative relationship we've built up, because I've realized that without the support of your peers in an industry, and I'm not saying you can do it with everybody. I'm not saying that you're going to go and take hands with the guy who's opened up in clear opposition to you, and who you can work with and you can't work with. But I think in our example, so Stevo, his big focus is on training. He has his own coffee brand, but his primary business is that he wants to grow his consultancy and barista training. I, on the other hand, have had to realize that I don't have time to train baristas. As much as I wanted to, and I kept promising people that I'd do barista training, I realized I'd never do barista training. I just don't have the time. I don't have the patience. Stevo's got a teaching background. He has far more patience than I do, and he's far more passionate about the training side of things. So I realized, well, you can't be all things. You just don't have that much. There are only so many hours in a day. And one has to eventually look at your lifestyle and realize that you are putting on weight and losing more hair and becoming more grey. And I've now got a 5-month-old baby boy, so of course my priorities have also changed drastically. So it's saying, well, let's rather partner with somebody who's focused on a different aspect of the business. Let's rather collaborate and work together in growing our individual businesses. So if somebody approaches me for barista training, I say, go speak to Stevo. Stevo has a client who wants coffee, come speak to James. And so we kind of work together in order to grow our individual brands. And it's only through that way that we're actually going to be successful. It's pointless working against each other the whole time and going, oh, I want to be I want to be the master of all I survey. It's mine. It's my precious. It's mine. I don't want to share it with anyone, because you isolate yourself. That's what I did. As I isolated myself in the industry, and I've now learned to try and open up and even work with other roasters. So we had a great event. Marie-Louise, who's sitting here tonight, and Shupi, who has also organized the Bloom Coffee Expo, have also forced us to speak to other, as roasters, as competitors in a market, actually forced us together. They've also, through trying to grow the community and growing coffee and the culture of drinking better quality coffee in Bloemfontein, those events have forced us to work together to make them successful, because we all have a vested interest in making the event successful, because we all want to make some money out of it and, of course, use it as a marketing exercise. So, and it's important to sometimes not to share all your secrets with your competitors, of course not, but don't push them away. Don't make yourself an island. No man is an island, as one famous movie also used. What was it, about a boy? Anyway, like my movies. No man is an island. It's quite true. You mustn't isolate yourself in business, because you're just going to make yourself very lonely, and you've got no one to bounce things off. But that's what Stevo is. So Stevo is a sounding board for me, and I hope for him I'm also a bit of a sounding board. I talk a lot, so he's more of a sounding board than I am.
I listen.
He's a listener. I'm the talker. And I'm very grateful for that relationship that we've forged, and we're forging ahead with it, and we're hoping to grow our businesses. And so together we will be successful. We're not partners in business. We have no vested financial interest in either. When he does training for me, I am his client. And when we do something with roasting, he is my client. So we build each other's brands together. And we're hoping to forge other similar relationships with other professionals in the market as well. And the shared goal that we have is growing this coffee growing community, this coffee drinking rather community in Bloemfontein, and the appreciation of good quality coffee, a good cup of coffee, and what that really means, you know. So that's ultimately, I think, what we're trying to achieve by working together.
James and Stevo, thank you so much for your time this evening. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I'd like to also give a big shout out to all of the all of our partners that make these events possible. A big thank you to Envy and the Ping family and the Ping team. Thank you to Sonique Productions. Thank you to Karine from Meraki Photography and Zita from Zita Films. It is literally the entire production that makes Startup Grind Bloemfontein stand out in the way that it does. Startup Grind is a global platform with over 450 events happening monthly across the world, and we really do get recognition and thumbs up being in Bloemfontein and standing out for the quality of work that we put out, especially from our speakers and our production crew. And a big thank you to our team and volunteers, the musicians that provide entertainment every month, and our very, very entertaining host, Richard Shamali. So thank you all for coming. Please grab another cup of coffee. We're here till just after 9, and good night.